friends. Welcome to the Connected Mom podcast, where I like to say we have real conversations that help you to connect more deeply with God, more empathetically with your fellow moms, and more intentionally with your child. And connection is a big deal because if you are disconnected from your child, things are not going to go well at home, and you're going to feel frustrated, and your kiddo's going to feel frustrated. And today, our guest is an expert on connection. So I'm super excited. Jenni Lord is the founder and CEO of Chosen, and she is also my friend. And she's amazing because she has developed a whole strategy for helping parents to connect with their kids. She says that the welfare system is broken, and that is true. And that so many kids come out of foster care and they're more traumatized than when they went in. And so today we're going to have a conversation that really not only applies to kids that have been adopted or who have come out of foster care, but they're going to apply to your biological kids too, that you need to reconnect with, because again, connection is everything. So welcome, Jenni.
Hi, Becky. So glad to see you today, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, you're amazing. And so, okay, first of all, tell us about your family and a little bit of your story.
Sure. So I have one husband. We just celebrated
That's
20
always
years.
good.
Just one.
Too many.
I usually say I have 4 kids and one husband, and we're going to keep it that way. My husband and I just celebrated 20 years of marriage last week, and we may get into this a little bit, but I think our marriage is a miracle given the brokenness from our childhoods. And so I love him dearly. His name is Rob. And then I have 4 teenagers, 19, 18, 17, and 14. And for any of you who are doing the math, yes, I had 4 kids in less than 5 years, and it was bananas. So that's a little bit about my family. I live in South Central Texas, and Becky and I met about a year ago, and just delighted to be here today.
Yeah, so that is true. I've never really thought about that before, Jenni, that you had 4 kids under 5 years. That is bananas. So you must have been really tired back then.
Oh man, yes, it was like 7 years where my joke is I was either vertical or I was in bed. Like there was no sitting down unless I was nursing. It was just crazy.
Totally, because I don't know if your children were placid and laid back or if they were active. Mine were more spread out, but they were active and very verbal from a young age. So there was always a lot going on.
Likewise, a friend one time once came over to help me when my kids were little. My oldest was probably about 5 or 6 at the time. She said, "Your kids use all of their gross motor skills. They don't know anything about quiet, fine motor skills yet." So it was very loud and very busy.
Yeah. But you know what I say, Jenni? I'd rather have loud than a dud, So, I mean, my kids had personality. Sometimes it was a lot to manage, but it was fun as well. Okay, so I would love for you to tell us the story. How did you get into this whole connection thing and starting Chosen? Did you just wake up one morning and think, oh, I'm going to start a organization called Chosen? I mean, how did that come about?
So the backstory is I have a brother who was adopted out of foster care, and he came into our home 30 years ago. I was a teenager and he was a toddler, and his adoption took about almost 5 years to complete. And so as I was entering adulthood, going through that process, seeing the inside of the child welfare system, God really used that as a catalyst to break my heart for, I think, what breaks his. Like you said in the opening, just that children could come out of a system that's supposed to protect them worse off than when they entered. And I saw how kids were falling through the cracks. I saw how harmful it was to drag those cases out. And so I just wanted to do something about it. And that pathway of child advocacy wasn't necessarily open to me right after I graduated from college. So I just got a job, started working in corporate America, had some wonderful business experience in startup environments as well. that paved the way for this starting an organization. And fast forward, after I had 3 babies back to back, I was getting back into shape. That was my goal, was after 3 pregnancies, okay, I'm going to start running. And I started running with some friends to train for my first half marathon, trained for 5 months, absolutely loved it. This was 2008. And I got to the start line with 30,000 people. And, if you've been to a major sporting event, hockey, right? And the air is electrifying, except I wasn't just a spectator. I was a participant, right? And so much adrenaline, so much excitement build up to this day. And I had really what I now would say it was a defining moment where, like the movies, the crowd goes quiet. And this thought was playing in my head, which was, what am I doing this for? I need to be doing this for something I believe in. And I said it out loud to my training partners. All the hard work and really the me time of 5 months of just getting away and trying to regain my sanity seemed very meaningless. And I said, I need to be doing this for something I believe in. And my friend said, like adoption. And I said, yes, like adoption. And so for 2 hours and 14 minutes, we talked about what would it look like if we had a race that raised money to help adoptive families.
Okay, wait a minute. Did you have that conversation while you were running? You talked and ran at the same time.
Well, 2 hours and 14 minutes is slow. So we ran for 13 miles, but we talked about it. And Becky, all I can say is it was a God idea. At the time, the race industry was not saturated with cause races. Really, Susan G. Komen was the only one. And we didn't have a half or full marathon in my hometown. And so I felt like the Lord gave me this idea to help families. The church had really woken up in the 2000s we have a worldwide orphan crisis. We have a foster care crisis in our backyard. We, the people of God, are called to care for orphan and vulnerable children. And so it was just a common conversation in my friend and church group of we need to do something about these kids that need families. And so fast forward, long story short, I started an organization and really backed into the nonprofit space. And we raised money for about 5 years to help adoptive families. And then I started learning about people dissolving adoptions and putting kids back into foster care or rehoming them somewhere else. And the Lord used that experience to break my heart all over again, which set me on the course to learn about connection. So that was a long story, but really there was multiple very instrumental milestones in my life that led me to this point of learning about connection, how critical it is for families, for the health of families, how critical it is to the heart of God.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I can't believe that you ran and talked at the same time, because I don't think I could do that. I think, I ran one race one time. It was 6 miles, and I was proud of myself for doing that. But I couldn't have talked the whole time, that's for sure. I think I kind of tripped over the finish line.
Becky, what's been cool is, we talk about sometimes how God called Peter to use what was in his hands, right? That the fishing pole, the net in his hands. And God called me to use what was at my feet. And that has been a recurring theme because we're blazing a trail, doing something that needs to be done, pioneering a different way of working with children who have been traumatized. And I think I was just faithful with the first yes, using what was at my feet.
Yeah, I love that. So, okay, tell us why connection is so important. Help us understand that, Jenni, because some people leaning in might think, well, I feel disconnected from my child, but I'm feeding them, I'm providing clothes for them, and I'm too tired to connect right now. Why is connection so important?
So, I'll start with a couple of origin words. In my space professionally, we're working with children who have been traumatized. And trauma is a big word that gets thrown around a lot, but the root of it means wound. So children who have been wounded by abuse, neglect, and abandonment. And what happens when we are wounded, especially young children, they live in a self-protective state of fight, flight, or freeze. and there's cortisol, the stress hormone coursing through their bodies because of that experience. And that in and of itself, when a child comes into a new home, the way that manifests is oftentimes through behaviors. Children don't necessarily have the language to express how crazy it feels on the inside of their body, or why they're upset that you made their sandwich that way, or that you didn't make them what they wanted, right? And so very small things can become very big challenges in a home with a child who's been traumatized. And you and I know this as moms. You don't have to be parenting a child with trauma to have big behaviors in your home. But what I have learned is that connection over correction, when we prioritize connecting first with our child and pursuing their heart, it actually calms behaviors down. And I've seen this anecdotally in our experience at Chosen for the past 10 years. I've lived it personally in understanding that as well. And Becky, I'll just confess something. There was a collision of our work, Chosen's work, with my personal life. It was a very jarring and painful experience, actually. When my kids were so little and so close together, I was trying to control the chaos. There was just constant chaos. My husband traveled a lot for work, and coming out of just broken homes with loving parents, but broken homes and families, I knew that I wanted to parent differently, but I don't think I had any strategy for that. And I was just trying to get to the other side of drama all the time. So my strategies in parenting for the first 10 years of parenting were really control and correction. I'm not proud to say that. I had learned from some moms at church, obey right away, all the way with a happy heart.
Oh, I've heard that too.
Does that work? And as an adult?
Sure doesn't.
I mean, and so it was this demand almost for obedience. And I was using an authoritarian style where it was, I'm the parent, you do it because I say it, like just that kind of mentality. And it wasn't working. It wasn't going well. I have, most of us have at least one strong-willed child in the mix. And I had one, still do. And whatever I tried, it didn't work. And so when I began to learn about how connection brings healing to the relationship, brings healing to the brain, brings healing to the heart, and why it's really a picture of how God pursues us relationally, I was confronted with, I'm not parenting this way. I not consistently. I'm not always thinking about how am I cultivating this relationship of trust that actually shapes behavior and shapes reactions and character versus just trying to control the chaos. And so with this confrontation in my own life, it really radically changed me in my own approach to parenting. And it wasn't overnight. I had to undo some things. I had some default patterns in my own home that were maladaptive from my own childhood wounds, and that were also just not effective in cultivating the strong relationships that we all want with our grown children someday. And so I had to make my own adjustments as I was learning how to do this with parents who were parenting traumatized kids.
So, can you give us an example of one technique that you changed as you left control and correction and moved towards more connection style parenting? Can you give us one example, one story maybe?
Sure. So I remember a story with my youngest son, my youngest child, who was a boy. And I thought I was going to have a boy that was going to be like my husband, like super laid back and chill. He's got 3 older sisters. That didn't happen. He was wired more like me, like just he got, he has his own way and his own way of wanting to do things, not wanting people to tell him what to do. And so he was very challenging when he was young and the cutest boy, right? But he just could. he could go from 0 to 60, explode in anger over small things. So that volatility in our personalities, like just in conflict, was not going well. And so I remember there was an incident where he threw a hanger at me and was yelling and shouting, and then ran into his room and slammed the door. And instead of going in and yelling back and correcting in that moment, I took a very deep breath, and I thought about my own trigger was just really disrespect. And he had been very disrespectful in that moment. And that trigger for me in the past, where I would just react without thinking, where you're just trying to control again, like stop the crazy. And I took some time to just pause, collect myself, deep breathe. And I went in and I just told him how he was crying, and like he was very upset with himself, talking to himself, like how bad he was for doing that to me. And I just went in and told him how much God loved him. And I said, son, God loves you, and he wants to help you not respond in this way when you're upset. And it was a different way of approaching, just pursuing. He felt shame. He already felt remorse for what he was doing. And instead of me going in and dropping the hammer I went in to just console him and tell him how much God loved him and how much I loved him. And I ended up really having an opportunity to talk with him about the heart of the Father, the Heavenly Father. And that was a turning point in our relationship. It really was, because that disrespect trigger for me was big. I would overreact to that. And that was rooted in some childhood things for me too. And I had to learn a different way of handling that, one, recognizing the trigger for me, but also how do I respond differently if I'm going to really pursue that connection first.
Yeah. And so, with your son, he felt sorry for doing what he had done, and he felt shame. What would you say to the mom whose kid maybe doesn't feel sorry and is exploding in anger and doesn't feel bad afterwards, or just how does mom connect with that child?
So, I'll tell another story. One of my teenagers in the house, something happened over the weekend, and big incident, and hard to navigate as a mom and walk through that and kind of unwind some just bad choices. One of my kids made some bad choices, and they knew they were in trouble. I'm going to keep their idea. I'm going to protect them now. They knew they were in trouble. And the next day, this child was a little bit surly, not talking, not making eye contact, just not in a good spot, right? And I said, I can tell that you feel bad about what happened and that you feel ashamed about that. And you haven't apologized. And I was like, this was over the course of 2 conversations, because the first one I just planted the seed, got no response. After school, brought it back up and just said, you haven't apologized. I don't need the apology as much for myself as you need it, because you're carrying this shame because you feel bad. And the way through that is to repent, is to acknowledge that like what you did was wrong before God, and that he exposed it in his mercy so that you didn't have to live in secrecy. And so it completely changed when I just said, this is real. I feel sad for what you're carrying, that I know if you were just repentant, how much better you would feel and what would come from that. And you know what happened, Becky? I had to call my husband last night because he's out of town. And I said, with this child, I cannot believe how connected we were tonight, how engaged, telling me all about their day, hanging out with me. And it was a reminder to me of how sometimes I have certainly been guilty of this in the past, where you avoid the conflict. You're just, I don't want to deal with it. I want this to go away. I just want to keep the peace. But on the other side of conflict can be something beautiful when we lean in to connect and have the hard conversation. And so I think, obviously one story was with a child that was 6 years old. This was about a story with one of my teenagers, and there's a different level of cognition in this. But no matter what, I think it's just, if you pray and you ask the Holy Spirit, he shows you how to, and we're not going to get it right every time, but to just plant the seeds and have the conversation and lean in and attempt to, versus I could have been really snarky about, and like, why you're the one that you made these choices and now you're not going to talk to me, and like, that's not going to get me anywhere, right? And so I think just being sensitive to like really trying to use it as a teachable moment and see and the beauty that came from having the hard conversation to pursue my child's heart through that was extraordinary.
So one of the things that I know you teach, Jenni, is how as a mom, we have to stay regulated even when our kids are dysregulated. Talk to us about that. How does that look? I mean, when mom's rushing to get dinner and one of her kids is just kind of losing their stuffing, or you're trying to get your kids out the door for school and one kid is having a major massive meltdown, and mom is getting increasingly ramped up because she's got to get the kids to school so that she can get to whatever. And how does she self-regulate, and why is that important?
Yeah, great question. So I like to say, and our team likes to say, a dysregulated parent cannot help a dysregulated child.
That's profound. Unpack it.
I really wish I would have learned that before I had kids, or in the first 10 years of parenting. And so if I'm out of control, if I'm angry, if I'm raising my voice, if I'm exasperated, selfish, right? Like, connection is not convenient. It's not convenient. It's not on our schedule. I'm not scheduled. I have a full calendar. I'm not scheduling. Like, make sure you connect, right? It requires intentionality. And so in those scenarios, when you have a child who's losing it, and I like to have things in order. So if a kid is melting down and I'm trying to get dinner on the table and we've got to schedule and all the things, it is not convenient for me to stop what I'm doing and give my full attention to that child that needs me to help them calm down. And so I think, first of all, it's just acknowledging that within yourself, like, this is going to take time, intentionality, and sacrifice. Those are required ingredients. And then keeping myself regulated. I know when I had littles and somebody was melting down, throwing themselves on the ground, crying, like, that could be pretty dysregulating for me. So I had to learn, like, what are my calming techniques? How do I calm myself down? I can take 3 deep breaths. Our deep breaths regulate our nervous system. I can teach my child how to take 3 deep breaths. I can hold that child next to me where we can feel our abdomens move together, taking those deep breaths. That can just be a very practical way, especially with young children, to help calm in the moment, right?
I love that. Because I think sometimes, let's face it, it can be very triggering and dysregulating for mom when your kid is just losing it, right? But then it almost seems like when we get upset as moms, that amps it up for our child. Is that correct?
Absolutely. There's mirroring neurons, which means that when I smile, you smile. If I'm sad and crying, like, your face might look like concerned, and you're leaning in, like, you're not smiling when I'm crying. So we play off of each other, and kids do that too. And kids with trauma really do that because they have become masterful at watching facial expressions. And so if you are scowling, if you're angry, you're tense, you're disconnected, you're not making eye contact, like children are perceptive. They pick up on that. And it really is important that we control our own faces, our own facial expressions, our tongues, right? With older kids, I'm not going to go to my 17-year-old and say, okay, breathe with me. Let's calm, like right there. That would be weird. But they're at a different cognitive level. This just happened a couple of days ago with one of my teenagers. I was traveling the next morning, had to get up super early for a flight. And there was a very tense conversation happening about something earlier in the evening. And I was already going to be at a sleep deficit. And she was getting very worked up. And I said, this is a really important conversation. And I would like to come back to it tomorrow because I think right now at 11:30 at night, we're not going to solve this. And so, I'm getting up early for my flight in the morning. Can we come back to this tomorrow? And so, and it was heated, but with a child that is older than a little one, where there is that same need for calm, the same need for connection and repair is so important. Like she was very upset with me about something that had happened earlier in the evening, and I wanted the chance to repair it, but I knew that I could not give her the attention and time that was truly needed to really unpack it. And so we had to have the conversation the next day. And I think just modeling that with your kids, modeling how to navigate conflict. We're not going to do it perfect, but that's how we grow and learn, and how we teach them to do the same.
Yeah, I think you're right. And talk to us a little bit about, you used the word repair. And I like that word because there's obviously going to be disconnect between parent and child at different points. There's obviously going to be conflict, or where your kids are really mad at you as the mom. And there are going to be times where you're going to be really mad at your kids. So how does repair work happen? And why is that so important, Jenni?
It's a great question. There's a lot of talk out there about permissive parenting or gentle parenting, and people have asked us, well, you talk about connection before correction, and so let's pause on that for just a second. Isn't that how God is with us? Like when we blow it, His kindness leads us to repentance, not His harshness. That when has that tool worked? And if it works, then it probably is instilling fear. And so just that alone, just understanding that it's not a license to be permissive, but it is about pursuing their heart first. And so when they have blown it, so in the case with my son earlier that I talked about, when he threw the hanger, he felt very bad. And I didn't say like, it's okay. You can handle your madness that way. I talked about how we could handle that differently, and how it was not okay to ever throw something at somebody, and especially not your mom, like when you're upset. And so just working to repair in that moment of conflict and talk it through, instead of just, I could have, it was a very sweet moment that we had, and I could have just not even acknowledged the hanger part of the story. And that would not have been productive or fruitful in his life. And so being able to repair and say, like, I love you. I'm not mad at you. I forgive you. And I think, Becky, by that same token, it's super important for us to also model that with our kids. So in the case with my daughter that I mentioned a minute ago, where she was very upset with me, it was for something that happened earlier in the evening. I felt like what had happened, from my vantage point, I thought I was in the right. But listening to her, right, I'm like, okay, I could see how she was like, that was very offensive. And I had to apologize. I had to say, you're right. Like, I'm sorry, that probably came off really poorly. And I understand, like, it was, a certain thing about with the friend that she was hanging out with, that she wanted domain of respect kind of thing. And just being able to say, I'm sorry, I blew it, and I apologize for like letting it get escalated when it really didn't need to be. Learning to just say you're sorry both ways is important to repair the relationship. And in the case with the child that I talked about earlier from this past weekend, like, look what happened last night after we were able to repair with some truth telling. We had a wonderful evening together.
Yeah, I love that. So, man, we're almost out of time, Jenni, and this is so profound. I'm thinking through like a lot of times I feel like toddlers or early grammar school children, sometimes older, like preteens even, will just explode. And when they're angry, they'll use tones with their mom like, I hate you. What does mom do then to connect? You've got a child that's really mad at you, that's saying, I hate you, you know, and it's easy for mom to get her feelings hurt, because we want our children to love us. But what does mom do right then to connect?
Yeah. So I'm going to back up just a second before I answer your question. The way I define connection, the root word of connection is ties that bind. So what
I
binds us
love
together?
that.
We
Yes.
can have broken ties that are disconnecting us, and we can have ties that bind us together. And the way that I define healthy relational connection is to be seen, heard, valued, and known. We all desire that. We're wired for connection. We all desire to be seen, heard, valued, and known. And so, in that case of when a child is yelling at you saying, I hate you, you're so unfair, I wish I wasn't in this family, terrible things as a mom to hear that from your child. Wow, buddy, I can see you are really angry. Instead of saying, go to your room, like for kids with trauma, like sending them away is another form of separation, which is not always healthy. Sometimes you need space. Sometimes, depending on age, you could say, I think we both need a few minutes to calm down. But just acknowledging, I can see you're really angry. I hear that you are very angry with me, and I want to talk through that. Just that alone, they're not going to necessarily calm right down, but you're acknowledging and you're still pursuing that connection, seeing and hearing and once they're calm, once you get to a place of calm, I think just to show them that you value them, to say, that really hurt my heart to hear you say that to me. Can you tell me more about how angry you're feeling and why? And listening, one of the tools that we teach all the time is to get curious, not furious, right?
Yeah, I love that. That's a good line right there. Get curious, not furious. Write that down, moms.
Yeah. Become a detective. Like, there's meaning behind the behavior. Behavior is a strategy. And so when you look for the meaning behind the behavior, what's driving that? Wow. Like, my teenagers like come in snarky, like, throwing things around, like, what, what happened at school today? Just trying to engage, like, what's going on that is making them short tempered, and looking for those meaningful ways to connect with your child versus, don't come in here with that attitude. You need to check yourself at the door. Sometimes what we want to say, but to really be curious about our kids and look for that meaning behind the behavior and ways to lean in. It happened last night with one of my girls. She came in very upset, and I said, what's going on? She said, she has a friend that's going through a major crisis, and she was super upset. But me just pausing what I was doing to like listen so that she feels that connection with me and feels safe to tell me what's really going on in her heart. She didn't have to tell me.
Mm. I love all of this so much, Jenni. I'm a huge fan of your work and what you're doing. Friends, we are out of time, but I hope you took a lot of notes today because these are very practical suggestions for you. Hey, Jenni, where can our listeners get in touch with you?
Well, I'd love to connect with you. You can follow me on Instagram. If you're on LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn as well. And I have a website, jennilord.com. If you are a struggling mom if you've got a child in your home with big behaviors that stem from trauma, please don't struggle alone. We would love, our team of professionals would love to connect with you with very practical tools and coaching to help you build stronger connections in your home. You can connect with us on chosen.care. And please, again, don't be isolated and struggle alone.
Okay, don't struggle alone, moms. You heard that. Also, look up the organization Chosen. Is it chosen.care, right, Jenni? Chosen.care. So,
Chosen.care.
and you are a nonprofit, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So you may want to, donate there as well, which would be awesome because they are doing such profound work. Jenni, thanks for being our guest today. And hey, moms, I love that you joined us for this conversation. I think it is so important. And so I want you to ask the Lord this next week how you can connect more deeply with your child, and then maybe try some of these things that Jenni suggested, getting yourself regulated when your child's throwing an ever-loving fit. Get curious rather than furious. Think about what it looks like to make your child feel seen, heard, valued, and known. These are all great suggestions for you. So thanks for joining us today on the Connected Mom podcast. And we hope that you're going to join us next week again for another conversation that's hopefully going to help you connect a little more effectively.